In the bustling city of Nigeria, where the sound of traffic mixed with the laughter of children in the streets, a man named Moses lived with his wife, Kate. Moses was known as a hard-working businessman who ran a successful construction company, respected by his workers for fairness and admired by neighbors for generosity. Though he had risen from poverty, he never forgot the days when his mother sold tomatoes just to feed him, and that memory kept him humble. When he married Kate, everyone said he had found a queen fit for his kingdom, for she was beautiful, elegant, intelligent, and carried herself with the grace of an African queen. Moses adored her from the very first day, meeting her at a wedding and courting her with flowers, gifts, letters, and devotion, until she finally said yes. Their wedding was the talk of the town, a grand celebration blessed by elders and envied by friends. And Moses spared no expense to make her comfortable. He bought her a mansion with marble floors, glass windows, and gardens of roses, filled her wardrobe with designer clothes, and ensured she never lacked a thing. Friends envied her life and called her lucky. Yet luck is not always enough to keep love safe. Behind her radiant smile, Kate began to feel a shadow of loneliness, sighing when Moses came home late and frowning when his phone rang at dinner. Though he provided wealth, he did not provide presents, and she longed for conversations instead of handbags, for warmth instead of diamonds. The house became a prison of luxury, the roses mocking her emptiness. And while Moses tried to patch her sadness with trips to Paris and jewelry, she smiled during the day and cried at night beside his snores. She confided in friends, some urging patience, while others whispered that happiness might be found elsewhere. And the words, "A woman cannot eat money," echoed painfully in her heart. Social media only deepened the wound, as she saw couples enjoying simple joys of laughter and closeness that she did not have. It was in that void that Patrick appeared, a friend of her cousin, playful, attentive, and always available in a way Moses was not. He made her laugh until her sides ached, listened to her with genuine interest, and gave her the attention she craved, first through harmless conversations, then through late-night calls, and eventually secret meetings. She told herself it was innocent friendship, but temptation grows where loneliness lives, and one night when his hand brushed hers, a spark she had denied finally ignited. She knew it was wrong. She knew Moses didn't deserve betrayal, but her emptiness screamed louder than her conscience. And when Patrick kissed her, the boundary she swore never to cross shattered. That kiss haunted her afterward, filling her thoughts with both guilt and desire. And while Moses remained blind in his trust, she drifted further into deceit. Excuses multiplied, from visiting cousins to attending fellowship meetings, while secret rendezvous turned into hotel encounters. At home, she lived as a devoted wife in daylight, yet in the shadows, she became another woman entirely. Torn between the comfort of Moses' stability and the fire Patrick stirred in her. Nights turned into battlegrounds of emotion as she lay next to her husband, while texting another man, smiling outwardly while hiding tears, praying for strength while running again into temptation. Lies piled upon lies, every embrace with Moses feeling stolen, every smile another mask, until she wondered how long it could last before everything collapsed. Yet she could not stop, because her heart had strayed. Her body followed desire, and her soul, though heavy with guilt, was already entangled in a dangerous web, setting the stage for tragedy. Kate's double life grew thicker with every passing week, her laughter with Patrick growing louder, while her silence with Moses grew heavier. She perfected the art of deception, rehearsing stories before walking through the gates of her mansion, her heart pounding with every lie. Moses, blinded by love and pride in his work, failed to notice the subtle changes in her behavior. The perfume that lingered too long, the smiles that faded too quickly, the coldness in her eyes when he spoke of his dreams. In the construction world, his mind was sharp, spotting errors in blueprints and predicting delays before they occurred. But at home, his vision, blurred by trust, kept him from reading the blueprint of his wife's heart. Kate told herself that she was not truly hurting him, convincing her mind that as long as he did not know, there was no pain. Yet guilt gnawed at her, surfacing at odd moments, like when Moses bent down to tie her shoe at a family gathering, or when he praised her beauty in front of friends. The contrast between Moses' devotion and Patrick's passion created storms inside her, tearing her between security and desire, honor and betrayal. She began to dread Moses' kindness, for every act of love from him was like a dagger, reminding her of her unfaithfulness. When Patrick whispered promises of a life together, she laughed to mask her fear, knowing he was not the man to build her future. Yet unable to break away from the fire he ignited. Nights with Moses became routines of silence, her body beside him, but her spirit elsewhere, texting in the bathroom under the excuse of a headache. At church, she sang hymns with a trembling voice, feeling the weight of hypocrisy as the pastor preached about loyalty, family, and the sanctity of marriage. The walls of the mansion seemed to listen, the mirrors reflecting not her beauty, but her duplicity, and sometimes she would shudder at her own reflection, hating the stranger she had become. Her mother, a wise woman from the village, once visited and told her, "A woman who wears two faces will one day lose both." But Kate only smiled weakly, brushing off the warning. The community around them had started to whisper, neighbors noting her late-night returns, her unexplained absences, the occasional sight of her with Patrick in distant corners of the city. Moses dismissed them as envy-driven rumors, insisting his wife was faithful, defending her honor fiercely. But truth has a way of leaking through cracks, and soon even his closest friends began to advise him to watch more closely. Kate grew careless, emboldened by Moses's blindness, thinking herself untouchable, thinking the world would never expose her secret. She wore new dresses bought by Kwame, perfumes gifted in secrecy, and sometimes forgot to erase text messages that lingered like ticking time bombs in her phone. Each step she took into deceit deepened her entrapment, weaving a web so tangled that escape seemed impossible without destroying everything. And yet, in her heart, she sometimes longed for Moses to discover the truth, to end the torment of living two lives, to release her from the burden of lies. But the fear of losing her home, her children, her comfort, and her respect kept her chained to silence. Patrick grew bolder, demanding more time, pressing her to choose. But Kate, caught between two worlds, promised him everything, yet delivered only fragments. He grew restless, resenting Moses' shadow, mocking her devotion to a husband she betrayed nightly. Their secret passion, once thrilling, began to rot with tension, turning kisses into arguments and stolen nights into bitter quarrels. The balance of her life tilted dangerously, with Moses' trust on one side and Patrick's demands on the other, and she stood in the middle, trembling. Destiny was sharpening its knife, preparing for the cut that would tear her world apart, though she pretended not to see it coming. The fragile illusion of Kate's perfect life began to crumble. When Moses, for the first time, paused long enough to notice the shadows in his home. He returned early from work one evening, his tie still hanging loose, and found Kate startled by his sudden appearance, quickly hiding her phone beneath a cushion. The smile she forced seemed painted, and though Moses said nothing, the image burned into his mind like an ember that refused to die. He began to recall all the times she had come home late, all the nights she claimed exhaustion, all the unexplained perfumes that lingered when she hugged him. At first, he dismissed it, convincing himself that she was merely tired, that perhaps his own long hours had created distance between them. But doubt is a stubborn seed, and once planted, it grows even without water, feeding itself on silence, on glances, on whispers. The whispers in the community grew louder, reaching his ears through loyal friends who hesitated to speak yet felt compelled to warn. One night, his best friend Mensa pulled him aside, voice heavy with pity, telling him that people had seen Kate with another man, though Mensa swore he wished it were lies. Moses' chest tightened, anger battling denial, and he shook his head violently, refusing to believe that the woman he cherished could betray him so cruelly. Yet when he returned home and looked into her eyes, he saw not the sparkle of love but the flicker of fear, and that terrified him more than the rumors. He began to watch her more closely, noting every detail. The way she avoided his gaze, the way her phone never left her hand, the way her laughter on calls grew softer when he entered the room. Kate sensed his suspicion, and her heart raced with every question he asked, her lies becoming heavier, harder to weave smoothly. Kwame, impatient and reckless, pressured her to leave Moses, boasting that he could give her the same love and more, though in truth he could never match Moses's stability. The affair that once thrilled her now became a prison of fear. Her soul split between desire and dread, her body aching from the weight of two men's expectations. Moses's nights turned restless, lying awake beside her, while his mind replayed every warning, every whisper, every trace of perfume not his own. The silence between them grew so wide it could swallow the marriage whole, yet neither dared to break it. At work, Moses's workers noticed his distraction, mistakes creeping into his usually perfect calculations, his temper flaring at small delays. At home, Kate walked on trembling legs, her laughter forced, her beauty shadowed by sleeplessness, her spirit eaten by guilt. The children, innocent observers, sensed the tension but could not name it, asking why Beatrice no longer told stories at night, and why Papa no longer smiled at the dinner table. The mansion that once radiated luxury now echoed with suspicion, every corner heavy with unspoken words, every mirror reflecting the truth they both refused to face. Kate prayed desperately for a miracle, for some way to erase her sins and return to the woman she had been. Yet every message from Patrick dragged her deeper into ruin. Moses, though wounded, chose silence over confrontation, waiting, watching, and collecting the shards of evidence until his heart could no longer deny. The city itself seemed to conspire, the whispers reaching him, even at church, at business meetings, at family gatherings, until his soul burned with humiliation. In his silence, Kate mistook weakness, believing she could continue, but Moses's silence was not weakness. It was the quiet before a storm, and storms, once unleashed, spare nothing in their path. The storm broke on a humid Friday night, when Moses returned home earlier than expected, his heart already heavy with unspoken rage. He entered the mansion quietly, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the thick rugs, and followed the faint echo of laughter to their bedroom. There, instead of the wife he adored waiting for him, he found Kate sprawled across the bed with Kwame, their whispers dissolving into gasps when the door swung open. For a moment, time froze, the air itself refusing to move, and Moses stood in the doorway like a statue carved from fury and grief. Kate scrambled to cover herself, tears streaming down her face before words could even form, while Patrick leaped up, his bravado crumbling under the weight of discovery. Moses's voice trembled, not with weakness, but with a wrath so deep it could shake foundations, asking, "Why, Kate? Why would you betray me after all I have given you?" His words struck like whips, echoing off the marble walls, filling the mansion with the sound of broken trust. Kate wept, reaching for him, trying to form excuses, but every syllable turned to dust on her tongue. Moses turned his gaze to Kwame, the man who had stolen not only his wife's body, but his dignity, his trust, his peace, and his future. Rage surged in him, and though his fists tightened, he stopped short of violence, for elders had taught him that a man who strikes in anger loses more than he gains. Instead, he ordered Patrick out of his house, his voice carrying the force of finality, a roar that shook even the bold intruder. Patrick fled like a coward, leaving Kate to face the ruins she had created. Moses's eyes, once filled with love, now burned with disgust, and though Kate fell to her knees, begging for forgiveness, her cries only deepened his wounds. The children, awakened by the shouting, stood in the hallway, their small faces pale with confusion and fear, and the sight of them made Moses's heart break into pieces no wealth could mend. He told her it was over, that the vows she had shattered could never be rebuilt, that the love he once held was now buried beneath betrayal. Neighbors heard the cries, and by morning, the entire community buzzed with the scandal, tongues wagging, elders shaking their heads at the shame brought upon such a respected man. Kate's family, once proud of her marriage, now bowed their heads in sorrow, unable to defend her actions. Moses's business partners whispered in boardrooms, some pitying, some mocking, but all aware that even the richest man could be undone by betrayal at home. Kate tried to repair what was broken, writing letters, visiting Moses's mother to plead, but every attempt was met with silence. Moses withdrew into himself, focusing only on his children and his business. His heart hardened against her voice. Weeks turned into months, and Kate's once glamorous life crumbled. Friends abandoned her, gossip followed her like a shadow, and Patrick disappeared, leaving her with nothing but regret. She moved into a small apartment, stripped of luxury, her nights haunted by memories of what she had lost. Moses thrived in his business, but carried an invisible wound, the scar of betrayal etched deep in his soul. A reminder that wealth could build mansions but not guarantee loyalty. The children grew, scarred by the memory of that night, wary of love and fearful of betrayal, their innocence stolen by their mother's choices. Kate withered in isolation, her beauty fading, her name whispered only as a warning to young wives that infidelity destroys more than it satisfies. One rainy evening, she returned to the gate of Moses's mansion, drenched and desperate, pleading just to see the children. Moses allowed her in, but his gaze was cold, his heart locked away, and though he let the children hug her, he did not speak a single word to her. The silence was louder than anger, more painful than insults, a reminder that forgiveness is not always given, even when begged for. She left that night, knowing the chapter was closed, her marriage dead, her reputation buried, her life a tale of regret. Moses, though respected and admired, never remarried, devoting his days to raising his children and teaching them the value of loyalty, honesty, and honor. And in the community, the story of Kate spread like a folktale, retold in markets, at funerals, in weddings, as a cautionary tale about desire, greed, and the cost of betrayal. They said, "A man may build castles of gold, but a wife without loyalty will burn them all to ash." Kate became a ghost in her own city, a reminder of the danger of chasing passion at the expense of devotion. Moses stood as both a hero and a broken man, loved by many, but forever scarred by the one he loved most. And thus, the story ended, not with reunion, but with separation, not with forgiveness, but with a wound that time could not heal. The moral lingered like smoke in the air. Infidelity may bring moments of pleasure, but it leaves behind a lifetime of ruin.